Hello again, and welcome to the second of our Red Arc webinar series with Petrea King of Quest for Life Foundation. Thanks for joining us again, and thanks again to Petrea for being with us today. Just some housekeeping for today's webinar. If you could just type yes into the chat box if you can hear me, that would be wonderful so that we know that you're out there. That's all part of the communication ethic that Petrea will be talking about today. I mean, Red Arc are in the communication business, but all the Red Arcers are all tuned in avidly to today's webinar because we can all improve our communication inside and out. So I'm going to hand over to Petrea now to talk us through communication skills and how we can be better. Thanks, Petrea.
Thank you, Liz. It's lovely to be with you again. And hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. It's on communication. And I think becoming a good communicator is usually a lifelong journey. Even when you think you're a fabulous communicator, you'll get misinterpreted, misunderstood, and so we can always improve our communication. The starting point of every dream, of course, is to set your intention. Reclaiming your lunch hour is a great intention and can set the tone for a happier, healthier, more aware you. And last week we talked about two things that can be easily incorporated into your day at work. The first was to set a reminder to take 5 deep breaths every hour. When you do this, consciously relax your belly so that it gently rises and falls with each breath. This simple practice increases your awareness of the breath and where you're holding tension in your body. The more you practice, the better you'll become at noticing when your body is tensing up, and then you can consciously let go any tension when taking these long, slow breaths. You might want to add a stretch to your practice as well, or do some gentle head or shoulder rolls so that you interrupt the build-up of tension in your body throughout the day. It's a good idea to do a body scan too at the same time as you take these breaths. Just take your awareness to each part of your body and notice if the area is feeling tight or tense, and if so, consciously stretch or massage the area so that you soften the muscles and release the tension. You'll quickly learn where your favorite areas are to store tension. If you consciously release the tension every hour throughout the day, you'll find your awareness spills over into the rest of the day, and you'll notice when you're tensing up much more quickly. If you have a lot of tension in your shoulders, lower back, or in your neck, you might want to think about having a weekly or fortnightly massage that focuses on those areas until you're no longer habitually storing tension in your body. The other practice we talked about last week was bringing the mind to rest in the present moment by coming to your senses. Perhaps the most highly valued quality in human relationships is our presence, that we are fully present to another person when we're in their company. This means that when we come to a meeting or indeed any encounter, we're fully present and not being distracted by technology or our habitual way of interacting with people. If we're present, then we have access to new and creative solutions or ways of doing things. We feel empathy for and a sense of openness to the other person and their perspective. We have access to our spontaneity, clarity, insight, intuition, and sense of humour. And this brings a freshness to meetings and makes every encounter an opportunity for collaboration and creativity. I wonder how you've gone with your practice of coming to your senses over the past week. If you bring your awareness to the senses of your body throughout the day, you'll have found that your mind quietens down and that your efficiency and productivity will have increased. Today, I want to talk about communication and what it might be conveying inwardly to ourselves or outwardly to other people. Most of us have a lot of inner self-talk that goes on unconsciously. In fact, research shows us that most people are acting out of their unconscious beliefs and judgments 95% of the time, and are generally only consciously choosing what they do and say 5% of the time. We need to reverse that so that 95% of the time we're fully conscious of our words and actions, and that 5% of the time we're running on automatic. When we lack awareness, we fall into habitual patterns that judge ourselves or others. We tend to react in situations instead of being able to respond from a place of calm awareness. Many people have an inner critic that tells us that we're not enough, not good enough, not talented enough, not patient enough, not beautiful enough, not skilled enough, not capable enough, not adventurous enough. The list is endless. We tense our bodies as a reaction to negative self-talk. If you've been practicing coming to your senses over the past week, you may have noticed the relationship between tension in your body and the negative self-talk or self-criticism or judgment that you direct at yourself or others. We may have even developed a pattern of behaviour where we habitually criticise, judge, resent, or blame others, or want them to be different from who they are. In our workshops around the country, we've often asked our audiences who's had success in changing their partner. No one ever puts their hand up. It's hard enough to change ourselves without us trying to change someone else. We can liberate ourselves from these habitual reactions if we're consciously aware of our language and train ourselves to communicate more skillfully. There's just a small group of words that keep us trapped in these habitual reactions, and if we never let these words come out of our mouths except with awareness, we're well on our way to improving our communication skills. When we take responsibility for our own peace of mind, we understand that we're the cause of whatever we think or feel. No one makes us think or feel anything. This can be a bit disappointing, particularly if we blame other people for how we feel. It's very helpful to become aware of our language and the way we express ourselves. Becoming conscious of what these words are and when we use them, and changing them even in mid-sentence, can become our practice until we don't need such diligence. In order to have this choice, though, we need to be present and aware of what we habitually say when we're feeling a victim of our circumstance. The words we use when we feel this way limit our potential. These limiting words might include statements that begin with, I can't, you should, they have to, I never, you always. If you listen to this following sentence, I can't speak up in meetings, what we're really saying is we won't speak up in meetings because the fact is we almost certainly can speak up if we need to. It's because we willingly give our power to the long-held fear of speaking up that we're dominated by our inability to respond. We want to change that fear, which is simply a reaction, to a more positive response. We could change the sentence to, I choose not to speak up in meetings because I respect the fear I hold. This is closer to the truth if we want to be aware rather than feel and sound like a helpless victim. Or we could take courage and say, up until now I haven't been able to speak up. However, today I choose to speak up in this meeting. When we choose to change our victim language to a more empowered way of communicating, we find it liberating and it builds our confidence. Other words that you'll benefit from either omitting from your vocabulary or only using with very keen awareness include try. Either commit to it or don't. After all, who's in charge of your time or your diary? To say, I'll try and give attention to that project leaves the door wide open to not attending to it, or it implies that your schedule is out of your control. Here's another, if only. We generally use if only when we're resisting what is. If only I had allowed more time. If only they'd listened to me. If only I was as smart as my colleagues. If only they were as smart as me. If only we had more resources. We need to accept the circumstances and make the transition to respond to the situation in which we find ourselves. The word if can be problematic on its own sometimes too. We can spend a good deal of time and energy hypothesizing over what might happen, what could happen, and probably it won't happen. And here's another word to use sparingly, if at all: impossible. Very few things in life are impossible, and it certainly takes much longer to achieve what we perceive as impossible. Here's another: never and always. These words often sneak into reactive conversations. They never listen to me. I always thought they were useless. You never give me enough time. You always expect too much. She's always grumpy. These are sweeping generalizations, and their intent is often to wound or hurt someone. We often load into a present time issue all the resentments and stored up angst over past behaviours. It's best to use these words with great awareness and deal only with the present time event, using an I statement instead. This could change things dramatically in your relationships. For instance, if you say instead, I believe I have a valuable contribution to make to this issue and I feel that my ideas are worth exploring, you may receive a much better response than when you say, you never listen to me. Or instead of, you never give me enough time, you could change it to, in order for me to do the best job with this, I'll need to schedule sufficient time to give you what you want. That may mean that you need to state what you do need rather than complaining about what you're not being given, in this case, enough time. And lastly, but. Have you ever had a conversation where the other person says, I agree with everything you've said, but, and then they list all the reasons why they disagree with your perspective? There are certainly uses for but I'd suggest you be aware when using it. We can sometimes use the word and instead of but. For instance, in the previous statement, we could instead say, I agree with everything you've said, and I'm wondering how that might affect XYZ. In this way, we might build upon one another's ideas instead of seeing them in any kind of adversarial way. This small list of words isn't a definitive list, but it's a good start to becoming more aware of the language we use. You'll see that when you begin to put some of these ideas into practice, they actually shift your perspective from the world outside of yourself to the world within. Using I statements about what you believe, how you feel about an issue, what you prefer to have happen, is very different from a blaming perspective that sets up an adversarial standoff, which can disintegrate into a reactive conversation that doesn't progress a useful way forward at all. So in the coming week, practice being aware of your language, and when you hear some of the words we've discussed coming out of your mouth, see if you can catch them in time and change your words to being more reflective of how you feel or think or what you believe to be true, without making the other person or the situation wrong. Feel free to share your experience with me by emailing. You can email to socialmedia@questforlife.com.au and ask any questions or share your experience. You'll hear these words come out of your mouth. Sometimes you'll see them in hindsight, and then you'll begin to catch them in your mind before they come out of your mouth, and you can change them so that your language becomes far more empowered. And ultimately, you'll find that you would never use any of these words but with awareness. And then you know that a habitual neuronal pathway that you've laid down in your brain has literally evaporated and no longer exists. So don't forget to sign up for each webinar, and feel free to share the link with your friends and colleagues. If you have friends or colleagues too who are dealing with depression, grief, anxiety, trauma or illness who may benefit from our retreats, then please don't hesitate to be in touch with us. Until we meet again on the next webinar, where we'll discuss healthy choices that'll keep your energy and focus throughout your working day, I wish you a peaceful and productive week, and a more aware one at that. My thanks to Liz Rowell and Red Arc for making this opportunity available. And thanks for your company today. I look forward to being with you again next week. Goodbye for now.